Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today, I want to predict one of the biggest, most anticipated games of the year, God of War Ragnarok. And I need to do it before the entire plot of the game inevitably leaks online, as is tradition with PlayStation games, it seems. This is probably going to end up being kind of a longer video, so bear with me and let's get into it. So I think the best way to start this video would be to talk about the things that we already know about this game. And the primary one of those is that this is the final God of War game that takes place in the Norse mythology, right? They've said that they didn't want to make it a trilogy of games because they thought it would take too long to come out, which I can understand and certainly respect that. But what it means is that they're not going to be saving any Norse things, at least theoretically, for whatever they do next. And they'll probably be more willing to take risks because if anything doesn't pan out, they can just kind of reboot it again after the end of the Norse one, like they did at the end of the Greek one. So, kind of the training wheels are off. But the next thing that I really want to talk about would be that there are some things that I would consider spoilers that were revealed as part of the pre-order bonuses. The first of which is that they're offering a set of Vanir twins carvings. So this is in reference to Freya, who we know from the first game, and her twin brother Freyr, which is spelt slightly different. You may have thought I said the same thing, but they are different gods. And they are, more importantly, the only set of Vanir twins that I know of, so they are almost certainly the ones that these carvings are in relation to. They are twin fertility gods, which we're going to ignore the implications that that has, wherein Freya she's like the god of love and magic and fertility, obviously, while also moonlighting as a Valkyrie war queen, whereas Freyr really is just the god of sunlight. He's not especially important in the mythology. In fact, he's really only famous for riding a golden pig, which was built by Brock and Sindri, who, again, we know from the first game. He has a magic sword that can fight by itself, and he rides a really cool boat that can fold up so small that it fits into a bag. So I'm assuming him being in the game means a couple of things. Number one, we're going to see at least probably two of those three things that he has. If I had to bet, I'd say the pig and the boat, because the boat seems like a really easy way to just slap a Bifrost on it and get between realms. And the pig would just be a very easy thing to put in the background. Plus, Freya already had her pig in the first game, so it would just be a good way to like indicate that they are twins, other than them obviously looking similar. But it also means that we saw in one of the trailers that Kratos was being attacked by a light elf. And that makes sense, knowing now that Freyr is going to be one of the villains of the game, because he is sort of the god of the elves, right? They worship him because he is the god of sunlight, and they are light elves, right? So it would make sense that they are sort of his goons that they're throwing at you. I honestly don't know how important he's going to be to the story. I'm sure he'll be a boss fight. In the mythology, he ends up getting killed by Surtur, who's the leader of the fire giants, but we'll get into that when we talk about actual Ragnarok later. The other thing that I want to talk about from the pre-orders is the pins. So there's a set of 3 pins, a bear, a wolf, and a falcon, that they're giving away with one of the collector's editions or whatever of the game. Now, a knowledge of mythology and just common sense would lead you to believe that these 3 pins are references to certain gods in their animal forms. Obviously, the wolf is Loki. We know that there's that association there. There always has been. The falcon is typically associated with Freya, because she turns into a falcon quite often. We actually even see her turn into a falcon in one of the trailers, and she is known for wearing a cloak that is made from falcon feathers. She's a bird lady. And the bear could be either associated with Thor or Odin, But because we know that Thor is going to play a bigger part in this game than Odin, just based on the fact that they've already shown him off and they've made a big deal out of his casting, and they haven't really done that for Odin, I think it's safe to assume, or would be safe to assume, that the bear would be in reference to Thor, who again turns into a bear at multiple times throughout the mythology. And based on the design of him, I mean, they didn't make him look like that for no reason. He is a bear man, right? He's a big sweaty man. So that would be what a common base understanding of mythology would lead you to believe. But in reality, they are not based on those gods, I don't believe. I think, and it seems to be the popular theory, that they are based on, the wolf is still Loki, obviously, but the bear is Kratos, and the falcon is Faye, or Lao Faye, to give her full name. That's going to be important to know for later. We're going to talk about her quite a bit. This idea is supported by the colors of the pins themselves, right? The bear is this sort of gray iron color, and the falcon is a gold color, whereas the wolf is sort of a combination of the two. It's primarily gray, but it has little accents of gold under the eyes. And this would imply a certain level of, like, a familial tie, right? It looks like, these two things are coming together and they made this wolf, so, like, these are the parents and that is the child, right? It makes sense, and it's supported, I guess would be the word, by some of the other things that come in the collector's edition. The Steelbook has what appears to be a wolf pup sort of looking up to a bear. You can tell because the tails are different, which again implies that sort of familial bond. And then also there's an art print that comes with it that's two overlaid hands with sort of a design in the middle. And one of the hands is iron, and the other hand is like a gold color. And we, of course, know from the first game that Faye likes to leave dirty gold handprints all over the place. So, in reality, despite what the mythology and a base understanding of Norse myth would have you believe, it is very likely that this is just a representation of that family, despite the fact that there is absolutely no connection between Kratos and a bear, other than I guess he has a beard now, and Faye, or Lao Faye, has absolutely no connection to a falcon or a bird that I am aware of. The writers of Sony Santa Monica have made it very clear from the first game that they don't particularly care about the mythology. They seem to not really know anything about it beyond what you could find on like a really simple Wikipedia search, as is indicated by the fact that they made Faye a giant, which is not true at all. In the mythology, she's just a regular Vanir goddess, whereas the father of Loki is a frost giant. In fact, the only other place in which Faye is a giant that I'm aware of is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in which she is also a man. So maybe not the best reference to use for your wife character, but regardless, that is what those pins are for, and it does imply that Faye is going to play sort of a bigger role in this game, right? Which would be really nice, because in the first game, she was just a fridged wife, right? It was, if you don't know, a fridged wife or girlfriend it's a really terrible writing trope that lazy writers like to use all the time, in which a female character is killed off screen in order to serve as the jumping off point or the reason for a male character to go on his journey. Does that sound familiar? Because it's literally all that Faye was in the first game. So it would be nice if in this game we get to see more of her, although the only other thing that we know about her from the first game is that she put a protective stave around where her husband and her son lived, and then said, when I die, cut the trees that make that safety barrier around us. Just cut those down and use them as my funeral pyre, because I guess she figured as soon as she's dead, doesn't really matter what happens to her son and husband. So I guess she's just not a great person. there's actually one other thing that she might have done. Cory Barlog, who, if you don't know, is the director of the first game. I assume you do because he's like one of the more prominent names in the games industry. Has gone on multiple podcasts and talked about how all the like gold paint and stuff that you use to figure out where to climb was left there by Faye, implying that she took the exact journey that she expected Kratos and Atreus to take before her death. Which is a really cool idea. It doesn't really hold up to reason because she physically could not have done that without having access to a Bifrost. And also she would have had to anticipate the fact that Kratos would destroy the gate on top of the highest mountain in Midgar and then need to go on, the second half of the game's story to get to the other way of getting to Jotunheim. So either that was just a crock of shit, or Faye anticipated her husband being a complete moron in this one very specific way, which would be wild. But regardless, if she was able to do that, then it was also really nice for her while she was multiverse jumping to go into leave all of the paint for like Nathan Drake and Aloy and every other PlayStation first party character as well. It was really nice of her to do that. Shame she didn't like bring any guns or anything back with her. That would have been really, really useful. But I'm getting off track now. Pretty much everything else that we know about this game going into it is in relation to characters who are going to appear in it. For example, we know that Freya and Thor are going to be the primary antagonists of the game, which makes sense given that they are the people who had their children murdered during the course of the first game by Kratos. So in terms of motivation for wanting to kill Kratos goes, they would be at the top of the list. So it makes sense. Glad to hear it. In terms of Thor specifically, I'm relatively confident that he's going to want to specifically either kill or kidnap Atreus, because when people write for gods, specifically bad writers write for gods, they always want to give them the eye for an eye storyline. It's a huge cliche for writing for gods, right up there with making them absentee, which we already saw in Thor Love and Thunder, if you don't believe me. Those are the two things that happen with god characters in bad writing constantly. It's super annoying. I assume we're going to be getting that one. In the myth, Thor kills Jormungandr, the world serpent, who we will of course remember from the first game. They kill each other. Just Thor kills Jormungandr first and then dies from poisoning after the fact. I think it's like 8 seconds or 8 steps after the fact, like very shortly. So it's not a great victory, but he does technically win, I guess. In the game, they'll probably just have Thor kill Jormungandr as like a show of how strong he is, to be like, I'm a big bad guy, come fight me, Kratos. And then like Kratos will go in and fight him in a boss fight and end up killing him. Hopefully they at least make some reference to the poison during the fight, like maybe Kratos dips the axe in poison before he hits it with him, or like maybe he just fully grabs one of the fangs out of Jormungandr's mouth and like chucks it at him. Like, I don't know. Hopefully they make some reference to the poison to give some level of respect to the mythology, although I wouldn't necessarily expect it. Either way, Kratos is definitely getting that hammer, right? Mjolnir is the most famous weapon in Norse mythology. I cannot imagine a version of this game in which that hammer does not become a usable weapon. They gave a physical version of it away with the collector's edition. It would be a huge L at this point for it to not be usable. So we're getting that hammer, almost certainly. Another character that we know is in the story is Fenrir, the Great Wolf. We saw him in the most recent trailer. He's just a big wolf. He's just a big dog, right? He's very important to the story of Ragnarok, although maybe not especially interesting. I think he's going to end up being a friend to Atreus, because Atreus is Loki in a twist that still makes no sense and is deeply irritating. But what that means is that Fenrir is Loki's child, as is the world serpent and the god of hell, who is named Hel. They probably won't get into that too much, hopefully, because I really don't want them to talk about why this like 16-year-old kid has 3 children and they're all horrible monsters. They probably won't talk about it, but they will be allies, right? In much the same way that the World Serpent was sort of an ally to Kratos and Atreus. I don't think that he'll like help you in combat, but he might be a part of some like cutscene battle in the background, like how Jormungandr fought the ice giant during the last boss fight of the first game. I would expect something like that, and beyond just the he's his kid thing, I also think that they'll be allies because at the end of the first game there was this motif on one of the walls in Jotunheim that had Atreus walking with 3 wolves, and one was out in front of him and 2 were behind him. And what that implies to me is that the one in front was Fenrir, Loki's child, and the 2 in the back were Fenrir's children, who are Skoll and Hati, who are of course the wolves who chase and will eventually devour the sun and the moon during Ragnarok, or at the beginning of Ragnarok. So they are all very important to the story of Ragnarok, although not necessarily in like a narrative sort of way. They just cause a lot of problems, and Fenrir in particular does a lot of killing, but we'll get into that later when we talk about what happens during actual Ragnarok. The only other wolf that could have appeared on that motif would be Garm, but I don't think that they're going to include Garm in this game, because that would end up being like the 6th wolf, because we're already going to have Skoll, Hati, and Fenrir, because they're very important to the story of Ragnarok. We can't tell a Ragnarok story without them. We're going to have the 2 wolf dogs that pull the sled that we've seen in the trailer, so I don't think we necessarily need a 6th one with Garm. They will probably just conflate Garm and Fenrir, because that has been done before in the past. I don't love the idea of people thinking that those are the same characters, but I would understand in this case why they would do it. And I wouldn't even necessarily hold it against them. Another major character, speaking of Fenrir, is his mother, Angerboda, or Angerboda, if you're particularly Anglo in your pronunciation. So, Angerboda is, again, not super important to the mythology. She is basically just Loki's mate. Like, I don't even think that they call each other like husband and wife. I don't think that they're married. I think it's literally just that they make monsters together. She's called the mother of monsters and like the bringer of chaos or something. Like, she's not a good person, right? So that's going to be interesting. Again, I don't think we're going to get into the storyline of her having given birth to these monsters. That seems unlikely, especially considering the age that they seem to be depicting her at. It would be very creepy for them to talk about that. So in reality, she'll probably just be like your standard manic Jotun dream girl character, which I expect will be not great. I'm hoping that they handle her well and make her an interesting character, because she really doesn't matter a whole lot to the mythology, like I said, so they do have a lot of leeway with her. I do already see the tweets. Like, I know that it's going to happen, that people are going to be like, why is this black girl in my video game? And like, they'll try to be like, oh, there couldn't possibly be a black person in Norse times. And it's like, whatever. Like, I know, like, that's going to happen, so just brace yourself for that. That's not a prediction for the game, it's a prediction for the downfall of society. But it is going to happen, and unfortunately, the people who hate her for that reason are going to completely drown out anybody who doesn't like that character for any other reason. So you may as well just keep it to yourself, honestly. Realistically, I think that instead of making her evil, they'll probably just have her sort of incidentally drive a wedge between Kratos and Atreus, in that maybe she's going to be really gung-ho for like, let's kill the gods, let's get the monsters together to fight the gods because they suck, and Kratos will be like, we probably shouldn't do that because when I did that in Greece it was really bad, it was a really bad idea, let's not do that. And Atreus will be like, but she's hot, so like, you know, I think the she'll end is like a schism between them. You know, she's going to be problematic for their relationship, but I think she'll still be a good person. Hopefully. There's a couple other characters that we know are going to be in it, but again, none of them I don't think are going to be particularly surprising in what they do. They've added a character named Durlin, who I think is supposed to be a analog for Dervin, who is he's just another He's just another dwarf who builds things. That's in Norse mythology. That's really all the dwarfs ever did. So he's, unfortunately, in terms of the mythology, kind of interchangeable with Brock and Sindri. The only thing that I could find that he specifically makes himself is there's a cursed sword who like is really strong, but then it kills the person who uses it. I guess Kratos could potentially get and use that sword, but he already has two, so I don't know what he would need another sword for. I don't know. Maybe, but it seems unlikely. I think he'll just be a character who people will be like, oh, he's got the squid, which I think Sony Santa Monica actually specifically said is a squid-topus, which is a combination of a squid and octopus, which just made my skin cringe off, but whatever, that's what he is. So whatever. We know that Odin's going to be in the game. They haven't shown him off, or we don't even think that we've heard his voice in any of the trailers. I guess it's possible, but not to my knowledge. We have casting for him is really the only thing, and we know that he's obviously going to play a fairly major role in that he is the king of the gods, but I don't think that he's going to be in a lot of the game, just because Sony Santa Monica did specifically come out and say that Thor and Freya are going to be the primary antagonists, like we talked about before. I would assume that he will somehow end up dead by the end of the game. Maybe Atreus kills him. Who knows? But I don't know. He's going to be in the game, and I don't think he's going to matter particularly. We also know that Tyr is going to be in it. He is the Norse god of war, although most Norse gods are war adjacent. So being specifically the Norse god of war doesn't really mean a whole hell of a lot, which is probably why they gave him the like interplanal travel thing that they did in the first game. I think he's going to be an ally for a while and then end up getting really mad at Kratos because Kratos doesn't have friends. So they'll probably end up fighting at some point. And really the most famous thing that Tyr does is he loses his hand to Fenrir. And I noticed that in his promo art and in the trailer, he still has both hands. So I would not be shocked to see that change throughout the course of the, I almost said movie, throughout the course of the game. In the mythology, he tricks Fenrir into letting himself be chained up. And he leaves his hand in his mouth as like a show of trust or whatever, like a good faith thing to be like, look, if we actually chain you up, then you can bite my hand off. And then they do actually chain him up, and then he does actually bite the hand off. It's not a great moral, but it's basically he just sacrifices himself to get rid of Fenrir. But then of course Fenrir breaks out at the beginning of Ragnarok, so I'm not really sure how that's all going to fit into the storyline timeline wise, but whatever. I'm rambling, it doesn't matter. Basically Tyr's just going to show up and get dunked on by a wolf. That's what he does in the mythology. And then the only other characters that I want to mention that have casting are the Norns. And I bring them up because of something that I'm going to talk about later. But if you don't know, the Norns are one for one the Norse equivalent to the Fates. If you've seen the Disney Hercules movie, they're the ones who are sharing the eye. It's the exact same thing. They can see the past, the present, and the future. They know everything that has happened and everything that will happen, and they sort of weave the tapestry of fate. They have no control over it and cannot alter it. They just bear witness to it. That is their whole purpose. But we'll get into that again later when it is time to talk about that crazy theory that you probably already know about. The only other thing that we know about going into this is that it takes place during Ragnarok, and I have a lot to say about that. Because the game takes place during Ragnarok, we can imply a lot of other things. It basically means that the story of this game is pre-written, and all Sony Santa Monica has to do is take Kratos and just shove him in there in the most ham-fisted way they can find. And honestly, people would probably eat that up, because the story of Ragnarok is already pretty interesting. So if you just shove something they recognize into it, like Kratos, that's going to do like half of the battle for you. But if you don't know, Ragnarok is called the Twilight of the Gods. It's this big-ass war in which pretty much every important character in all of Norse mythology who isn't already dead fights, and almost all of them die. There's a very small amount of them who survive. Off the top of my head, I can think of Magni and Modi, who are not going to survive this time because they're already dead. Balder, who gets resurrected from the dead during Ragnarok. And it's like two other guys. One of them's like a son of Odin named like Valdar. It doesn't matter. I'm sure that half of that won't happen. But the factions in this war are the gods, both the Vanir and the Aesir, working together with an army of sort of warriors chosen by the Valkyries. You know that whole story. And those warriors are called the Einherjar. They're just big Vikings who fight, right? So I think we actually already saw them in one of the trailers, although I don't know that they were necessarily name dropped. But that is what they are. And they are going up against the forces of chaos, who are led by Loki. And the forces of chaos are giants, frost giants, fire giants, who are led by Surtur, who you might know from the movie Thor Ragnarok, although it's not a great representation of him, of course. And they also have an army of the dead, because Loki's daughter runs Helheim. So they just summon a bunch of, basically it ends up being all the bad people, and then all the bad gods and monsters, with all the dead bad humans versus all the good, quote unquote good gods, with all the good dead humans just fighting. Right? It's the whole reason that people are taken to Valhalla if they die honorably, is so that they can be prepared to fight against everyone who didn't die honorably when Ragnarok comes. It's a kind of a grim future if you think about it. Because what happens after Ragnarok, who knows? But regardless, some of the more notable events that happen during Ragnarok that Kratos will be ham-fisted into, and I'm sure the most awkward way humanly possible, is of course Thor fighting Jormungandr, which we already talked about. Tyr ends up getting killed by Garm after he breaks out of Hell, which Garm, again, will probably end up getting replaced by Fenrir. The way I imagine that happening is just Tyr will at some point learn that Atreus' name is actually Loki, and then he'll be like, Loki, I know Loki from the story that is for some reason preordained in this mythos. So I gotta kill this dude because he's really evil, and then they'll fight, and Fenrir will kill him. Minimally, he's biting that hand off. If Tyr gets out of this with both hands, I will be shocked. He's probably dead, but he's definitely losing a hand. Another thing that happens is that Freyr, who we talked about earlier, the twin brother of Freya, ends up getting killed by Surtur, the leader of the fire giants. If I had to guess, Kratos will probably end up killing both of them, because Freyr is going to have all the light elves with him, and so he's probably going to be sort of a recurring villain throughout the game. And then Surtur is just a huge fire giant, which I cannot imagine Sony Santa Monica is going to pass on the idea of having that boss fight, because it sounds like a really cool set piece, and that's really what they do more than actually make combat good, is they make set pieces, and Surtur's certainly set up to be a set piece. So probably we're going to end up fighting both of them, because Surtur, he's not necessarily super aligned with Loki. He's just kind of we both want these people dead, enemy of my enemy, right? So Fenrir actually goes on to eat Odin, is another thing that happens. And then he ends up getting killed by Vidar, that's the other guy who survives, the son of Odin. I don't know that Vidar is going to show up, because if I'm correct in my assumption in this, the North Pantheon is just going to be completely laid to waste by the end of this. So I don't necessarily think they'll even bring up Vidar. But yeah, so Fenrir ends up killing Odin and eating him. I expect that it'll be Atreus who kills him, because Atreus is probably going to end up getting that kill. He needs at least one kill. I think he'll probably get that, as well as if Heimdall shows up, he'll kill Heimdall, because in actual Ragnarok mythology, Loki and Heimdall fight each other to the death. But now, of course, Loki is going to have the backup of Kratos, which I think will make the difference. So I think Loki's going to end up getting, or Atreus is going to end up getting a kill count in this one, hopefully. So let's see if that happens. And also, not related to Ragnarok, but I think that we'll also end up going, I didn't have another place to put this that I could find that fit well. I think we're also going to end up going to the other three realms that we didn't get to in the first game. Those are, of course, Svartalheim, which is the land of the dwarfs. I'm pretty sure that's the one that we've already seen in the trailer, where Tyr is implied to be by that trailer. But certainly, if you've watched the trailer, Sindri opens a door and is welcome in, or whatever, and that to me vibes with Svartalheim, so it's probably that. And then the only other two that we didn't go to in the first game are Vanaheim and Asgard, which are the home of the Vanir gods and the home of the Aesir gods, respectively. And if we're having a big war with the gods, we're probably going to end up on their home turf. It just makes sense we're going to end up there. I think they actually specifically said that you're going to end up being able to go to all 9 realms, but I really hope that that's not the case, because if they end up trying to make all 9 realms relevant in this story, then it's either going to be like 100 hours long or really disjointed. So hopefully it's not hopefully it's not too crazy like that. I don't know that we need to go to all 9, but whatever. Just tell the story you want to tell, I guess. I want to talk about some of the more crazy theories that I've seen floating around about this game. In particular, 2 of them. The first of which is whether or not Kratos will die. And by my estimation, I think he absolutely will. My only question is whether or not he will stay dead. If you've played the Greek games, God of War 1 through 3, he dies like 2, maybe 3 times, and then just kind of fights his way out of the underworld. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to do that in the Norse pantheon, especially considering that Loki's daughter, Hel, is the goddess of Helheim. So Kratos' granddaughter runs the underworld, so he could probably just walk out if he wanted to, honestly. So honestly, I don't think that even if he died in this universe, it would necessarily mean anything at this point. Also, PlayStation loves replacing their protagonists. Now, I don't know necessarily if they will leave him dead, because Kratos is pretty much the closest thing the PlayStation has to like a mascot at this point. So I think killing him off and leaving him dead would be a huge mistake. I wouldn't necessarily put it past him, looking at Joel, but I think that they'll end up bringing him back, is basically what I'm saying. But whether or not he does come back, it'll give us an opportunity to play as Atreus, which is something that a lot of people for some reason want to do. I hope that section where you play as him inevitably is a very short section of the game, because if Kratos doesn't come back to life by the end of the game and the next series of God of War is us playing as Atreus, the franchise is as good as dead to me. So hopefully he comes back. That's all I'm saying. I have no interest in playing as Atreus because that dude sucks. And the other major theory that's been floating around a lot that I also think is almost certainly true is time travel. Now, let me make this clear. I have read mythology books forever. I'm a mythology buff. I have read the World Encyclopedia of Mythology from cover to cover multiple times. In particular, with the Norse mythology, I have read the Eddas at least twice. Like, I know Norse mythology very well. What I can tell you with absolute certainty is that there is no justification or reference to time travel in Norse mythology. It's not a thing. The Norns are probably how they're going to end up doing it in this game, because I do believe that time travel is going to be in this game, because bad writers love throwing in an unnecessary time travel story. So we're going to get time travel, almost certainly. The Norns see fate. They can see the past, present, and future. They cannot control it. They cannot dictate it. They cannot change it. So my assumption is that they're going to use the Norns to do this. The only other even thing that could maybe be misconstrued as being related to time travel is that at the end of Ragnarok, those 6 gods who survive release 2 humans from Yggdrasil to sort of restart the human population, and they sort of start a new age for the world or whatever. It's some people take that as thinking that time in Norse mythology is cyclical. It is not. They are different gods. They do different things. That's just how the story ends, is like, and then we did this other thing. And so I guess people think that because the original version of Norse mythology started with 2 humans and it ends with 2 humans, that instead of that just being like a cool framing device, that it means that time repeats itself, which is ridiculous. There is absolutely no justification for putting time travel into this game other than because bad writers would think it would be cool. So they'll probably do that. They've proven that they don't care about the mythology based on the first game, so I don't think that they would necessarily even care that they're adding something so absolutely ludicrous to the mythology. So, whatever. My theory as to how it's going to end up happening is that either Jormungandr and or Kratos will end up dead, being killed by Thor. And so Atreus and Angerboda will go to the Norn, who live at the roots of the World Tree, and they will in some way convince or threaten or bully them into sending them back in time, which of course they can't do, but they will be able to in this game because the mythology doesn't mean anything here. And they are going to be the ones who blew the horn in the first game. There's a big, like, theory war about, oh, at one point in the first game, somebody blows the horn that summons Jormungandr. Who could it possibly be? And, like, the stupidest answer it could possibly be is that it's a time-traveling Atreus, which is why I'm almost 100% guaranteed convinced that it's going to be that. The lazy answer would be that it's Heimdall, because he blows a horn at the beginning of Ragnarok to signify that it has begun. But more than likely, it's going to end up being a time-traveling Atreus, because that would be the most stupid thing to do. And so, of course, that's what's going to end up happening. I think while they're back in time, there'll also be some emotional moment, because Kratos will be dead at this point in time. There'll be some emotional moment where, like, Atreus and Angerboda see past Kratos and Atreus doing something, and they're like, my father, I sure do love him from all the kind things he said to me. I don't know, whatever. But they'll blow the horn to summon Jormungandr, and, like, I don't know, maybe they get the poison that way, and then they go back in time to when Thor is fighting Kratos, and, like, uses the poison to kill Thor so that he can't kill Kratos, or something. I don't know. While they're playing around with the time travel, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they also go back in time to, like, have Faye have a scene with Atreus where, like, they talk or something. That would be actually kind of nice, because it would be cool for that character to literally say or do anything, because at least then I could pretend that she wasn't a terrible tropey plot device in the first game. But it seems unlikely that would happen. I guess it's possible. I don't think that they're going to go so far back in time that they can explain Angerboda having given birth to Fenrir and the World Serpent and Hela, because, again, that would be really gross, and also it would imply that they would have to go back in time and stay there for, like, a really long time. So unless that happens at, like, the end of the game, I don't know. I just don't think they're going to bother with it, to be honest. But yeah, so they'll do that, and they'll save Kratos, and then from being killed by Thor, and thereby kill Thor, and then they'll win the Ragnarok, and then they'll all go to Egypt to ruin a whole nother pantheon in the next series of games, like a good old-fashioned happy family. But that's just what I think God of War Ragnarok is going to end up being, and I would love to hear your theories about it down in the comments below. I'm not super excited for this game, which none of you should necessarily be surprised by, seeing as how there's a 40-minute video on this channel about why I didn't like the first game. But if you have theories about why this game could be really, really good, I would actually love to hear them in the comments down below, because I want to be more excited for this game than I am right now. I just really, really did not like the writing or combat or much of anything of the first game. But if you like this video, please go ahead and click like on it or subscribe to the channel. I really would appreciate any level of support you can give me, even if it's just a comment or sharing it online. That would mean the world to me. But then again, PlayStation videos don't typically do very well on this channel, so there's probably not many of you who are seeing this part of the video anyway. But regardless, I'll see you next time.